With every brand in the market hell-bent on creating their own version of the Rolex Submariner, dive-style watches can get a little repetitive to say the least. And while the same can be said for this Mido Ocean Star, I'm glad it has its own unique attributes and characteristics that makes it different from a sea of divers. Divers have been traditionally seen as tool watches in the watch community. They're built to do a job and also look the part. And by part, I mean some variation of the Submariner with its clean, no-nonsense design and overall reliability. That being the case, it means that most divers end up looking pretty much the same. Unlike many of its competition at similar price point, the Ocean Star doesn't follow the traditional narrative. There's no doubt the design takes inspiration from the classic dive watch formula. But it's playful, it's modern, and more importantly, it's different. It's less serious, moves away from the plain, everyday watch nature, and is much more laid-back, relaxed diver. And it manages to do so without compromising the dive-style vibe. So if you're a fan of divers but you're getting tired of the same old dive watch formula, then the Mido Ocean Star could just be the breath of fresh air that you're looking for. The Ocean Star sports a case diameter of 39mm, which I believe is the optimal size for any dive-style watch. Any smaller and they start looking a little too compact, and this is coming from someone with relatively small wrists. The lug to lug is proportional at approximately 46mm, but the lugs shoot out straight, which is something that we'll get into later on. Now to what I believe is a major upside to the Ocean Star. At only 10.5mm thin, it's no doubt the thinnest 200-meter diver I've ever had my hands on. Everything else is pretty standard for the price: 20mm lug width, screw down crown with 200-meter water resistance, sapphire crystal with AR coating on both sides, all powered by Mido's Caliber 72, a modified ETA movement with 72 hours of power reserve. With that out of the way, let's get into the fun bits. There's no doubt the dial on the Ocean Star is one of the most captivating features of the entire watch. No, it's not your typical matte black dial, but it's certainly more dynamic and immersive compared to traditional divers. Immediately, you'll find it difficult trying to balance your focus between the wave pattern and the color gradient, both of which are seamlessly integrated on the dial, but are executed well enough to warrant individual attention. My first instinct was to get my eyeballs as close to the dial as possible, and that's to check out the wave pattern in more detail. And let me tell you, the pictures do not do it justice. On Mido's official website, the pictures make the dial seem a little cheesy or gimmicky, but it's certainly not the case in real life. The wave pattern is embossed directly into the dial, which gives the Ocean Star a 3D effect. The texture almost resembles mountain gorges and troughs, and it's this interplay between sharp ridges and the shallow valleys that makes the Ocean Star one of the most interesting dials I've seen in a while, especially at this price range and especially on a diver. All of this, and we still haven't gotten to the black and blue gradient effect. We're all familiar with the Rolex Batman GMT bezel, but to try to replicate that philosophy on the dial itself is something I've not experienced. The dial transitions from a deep black at the top to a glossy navy blue at the bottom. And unlike the bezel, where there is a distinct split in colors, Mido has done a wonderful job creating a seamless transition on the dial. So much so you can't really tell where exactly it switches from black to blue. The hour markers are slightly recessed into the wave dial, almost as if they're nestled into the surface. It's a subtle touch, but one that integrates the indices with the rest of the dial, making it an all-in-one dial that's thoughtfully designed. Even with all these depth and visual effects happening, the legibility on the Ocean Star remains unaffected. The large, faceted hands and the white lume plots make it easy for time reading. The date window at the 3 o'clock with its thick border and white background is extremely visible under any conditions. If you're tired of thick divers, then the Ocean Star has a major advantage over any other divers on the market. At only 10.5mm in height, the Ocean Star is ridiculously thin. There's no unwanted protrusions that make the watch sit awkwardly on wrist. Everything sits extremely thin and flat. The screw-down case back showcasing the familiar starfish that is synonymous with the Ocean Star lineup. The mid-case is slim, and even the bezel integrates seamlessly into the whole design. The finishing on the Ocean Star is relatively straightforward, to put it mild-manneredly. It's mostly brushed across the case and lugs, with chamfered edges where the case flows into the lugs. Nothing about the case finishing on the Ocean Star screams a watch that is worth $1,200. It's almost as if Mido tried to juxtapose the 3D dial with an extremely simple and boring case design. I'm certainly disappointed, but I suppose they had to cut corners somewhere. I don't imagine the dials were cheap to make. But still, that's no excuse. And if Christopher Ward could make their light catcher case with all the variety of finishing, for the same price, if not a couple $100 less, I don't see why Mido couldn't have done a little more with the Ocean Star. Now, moving on to the bracelet, which I've got to say is a bit of a letdown. For the price point of around $1,000, the Mido Ocean Star's bracelet just doesn't hold up at this price point. Compared to at least other micro brands even or other Swiss brands, the bracelet just isn't there in terms of quality and finishing. On paper, it checks all the boxes. It's got solid end links, solid individual links, it tapers from 20 to 18, everything is solid, but on wrist and on hand, it just doesn't feel premium. At least it doesn't feel like a watch that deserves the price tag of $1,000. And that brings me to the clasp, which is honestly oversized. It's almost the same length as the lug-to-lug measurement of the actual case, which throws off the balance on wrist. It's bulky and not in a good way. The diver's extension also doesn't do it any favors. It feels clunky, outdated, and it doesn't inspire much confidence. It's the kind of mechanism you'd expect to see on a watch from the early 2010s, not something that's competing in today's market. On top of that, there are no micro adjustment holes and no on-the-fly adjustment system. Mido is clearly relying on the diver's extension to fill that role, but the execution just doesn't cut it. For a watch that has such an amazing dial, this part, the clasp and the bracelet, it just feels like it got left behind. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not a horrible bracelet per se, it's a passable bracelet for sure, but for the price, I'm definitely expecting something more from Mido. I can get a better bracelet from Traska for $600, so there's no excuse for Mido. It's almost as if Mido tried to take a page out of Seiko by delivering us a beautiful dial, but then dropping the ball on the bracelet. On wrist, the Ocean Star wears true to its dimensions. The 39mm case feels right at home on my 6-inch wrist. My self-imposed limit is 40, so the Ocean Star fits well within my comfort zone. The 10.5mm thickness is by far the biggest contributor to the comfort factor of the Ocean Star. It's certainly not something you see often for a diver with 200 meters of water resistance, and overall, the Ocean Star is a comfortable timepiece, but I do have some complaints. My first gripe is how the lugs extend straight outwards, which means the Ocean Star won't exactly hug your wrist. And sure, the thinness is a nice touch, but it does sit quite flat on the wrist. On top of that, Mido's decision to go with male end links doesn't help either. Combined with the straight lugs, you're looking at a watch that leans more towards 50mm in lug-to-lug. Even with my flat, skinny wrist, the male end links can sometimes protrude, and it does ever so slightly become an eyesore. All in all, on wrist, it's comfortable, but I do have my reservations. Having owned a couple of Mido timepieces, I've come to realize that you don't buy Midos for their build quality. Now, I'm not saying it's bad, but compared to a Christopher Ward wins in every single build quality department you can imagine. And even though I've just spent the last few minutes seemingly bashing on the Ocean Star, it is still a fantastic watch. For me, the dial carries the Ocean Star and it makes it easy to look past the shortcomings in the case finishing and the bracelet department. That being said, if you're interested in the Ocean Star with the intention of purchasing a high-quality, affordable luxury Swiss diver, then I'd say you'd be quite disappointed. But if you're buying it for the unique dial, then I'm confident you'll love it. And that brings me to my next question. If not the Mido Ocean Star, then what else is available at this price point? For roughly the same price, the obvious answer is of course the Trident from Christopher Ward. If anything, the Trident represents the complete polar opposite of the Ocean Star. Instead of a unique dial design, the Trident looks pretty plain and, for a lack of a better term, boring. However, the quality of case finishing and bracelet is simply unheard of at this price point, and no doubt makes them the kings in the department. So if your money is better spent on build quality, and you don't mind a more utilitarian design, then the Christopher Ward Trident is arguably a much better purchase for you. For a few $100s less than the Ocean Star, the Certina DS Action Diver 38 is a pretty good bet. I've owned it before, and it's an extremely solid diver, with design cues that lean heavily into the Submariner territory, clean, classic, and instantly familiar. It wears with real presence thanks to its hefty case and robust construction, and it has legit dive watch credentials. The bracelet, however, is where things get a little less polished. It lacks micro adjustment or half links, which made it tough to get a comfortable fit, and it's the ultimate reason why I moved from mine. Still, for the price, you're getting a well-made Swiss diver that punches way above its weight and will satisfy anyone looking for no-nonsense value and classic looks. On the flip side, if you're willing to spend a few $100s more, the Longines Hydro Conquest 39 becomes a serious contender. Compared to the Mido, the build quality is undeniably a step up, especially in the case finishing, the bezel action, and the bracelet. Longines also brings a certain heritage, credibility, being a brand with roots that can be traced all the way back to the 1800s. There's a sense of refinement that sets it apart from the other alternatives. The design is more traditional and perhaps a bit conservative, but it feels premium in all the right places. The bracelet offers a more solid feel and better clasp design, and the dial work, while not as adventurous as fun as the Ocean Star, is extremely well executed. So if brand prestige and build refinement are priorities for you, then the Hydro Conquest is well worth the extra cash. My final verdict on the Mido Ocean Star in 39mm is a contrasting one. On one end, I really appreciate Mido's creativity in coming up with a non-traditional diver dial, one with a color gradient that resembles the Rolex GMT bezel except for it's done on a dial, and the other, the wave pattern, is exceptionally well done. Those two factors in itself are impressive enough for anyone to want to buy the timepiece. There's nothing bad that I can say there. But when it comes to the build quality department, when it comes to the case finishing, the simplicity of the case finishing, when it comes to the bracelet, to the lack of micro adjustment, and the rather cheap feeling diver's extension, that's where my complaint lies, and that's where I think Mido could have done a much better job with the Ocean Star. Would I still buy the Ocean Star if I could do it all over again? Absolutely. For the dial itself, it's worth it. But then again, if you're looking for a Swiss diver that is built equally impressive, dial, bracelet, case finishing all around, then perhaps the Mido Ocean Star isn't for you. You're better off again with Christopher Ward, Certina, or if you have a bit more cash, the Longines Hydro Conquest. But if you want the dial, if you think you'll enjoy the dial, by all means go for it. You won't be disappointed. I'll see you on the next one.